Marvel, 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 Marvel. Hey everybody, it's AURAM'S FORUM. Wowzers, all you kids are super excited. Your jimmies are rustled. We're back at AURAM'S FORUM. So Marvel's doing some shit again. It's not exciting at all, unfortunately. I don't want to be negative about Marvel, and I'm being slightly hypocritical here because I hate people who are like, I wish I could like this thing, but I just can't. Which, I mean, yeah, that's kind of what I'm doing here. But, to be fair, Marvel's been pulling the same shit over and over again since, like, 2012, and I think it's time for them to stop. For those that don't know, Marvel just announced about a week ago, at the time of this recording, that's going to be very important, by the way, that this is news that is happening at the time of this recording. Obviously, things could change in a week or two, or when the actual stuff happens, but basically, Marvel announced with a little cute Twitter video and blogs blowing up about it, that they are doing a fresh start. Marvel's Fresh Start. That's what it's called. Now, what is this? On first face value, the news would have you believe that it's a reboot, because a lot of people were like, oh, Marvel's rebooting, but that happens every time. It's just a misuse of the word reboot. What it actually is a relaunch, the same thing that they've been doing since 4 months ago with Marvel Legacy. So yeah, obviously there are problems inherently with them relaunching again, but the even weirder thing is it's not completely a relaunch. It's not a full-on relaunch like they initially advertised. They were very confusing about it. I'll get more into specifics later. We're gonna go over like a quick overview of what's actually going on with this fresh start that Marvel's advertising. So yeah, let's do that, I guess. So basically, the gist of it is that they are relaunching most of their books. I was about to say all, but it's not all. They're relaunching most of their books with new creative teams attached to them, starting at number 1, kind of. Again, I'll get more into specifics later. And we don't have the whole list of books yet. Some can be, like, inferred, obviously, from, like, they're not just gonna stop making Spider-Man books, but I do have a list here of the stuff that has been announced at the time of this recording, and that is Immortal Hulk with Bruce Banner. So Bruce Banner's coming back as the Hulk. That's been being teased in Avengers. Thor, a new Thor book with the Odinson. He's worthy again. You could tell by that on the promo image and on this cover, obviously. We're getting a Black Panther book, of course. It's the Ta-Nehisi Coates run being relaunched as a number 1. And then a new Avengers book. Not a new Avengers book, just a new Avengers book. Not a new Avengers book, it's confusing. This is why you don't put new at the start of things, because Nintendo, I'm looking at you, stop. Anyway, we also have a Venom book, which, yeah, the bank putting a lot of stock in Venom lately. There's people are excited about that. I don't really care that much about Venom. Anyway, it's beside the point. We also have a Quicksilver miniseries, a Multiple Man miniseries, and a Cosmic Ghost Rider miniseries, who I guess Cosmic Ghost Rider is a character that was introduced recently. Again, irrelevant. The point is, these are the books that we have so far announced for this fresh start thing. Some of them are fine. Like the Avengers book with Jason Aaron, that's pretty exciting. I'm down to clown with that boy. Al Ewing writing a horror Hulk book. That sounds pretty cool. That's up my alley. I'd read that. But there are some issues. No pun intended. So I'm gonna get into specifics here. We're gonna break this video, or this discussion, or this, whatever you want to call it, this AURAM'S FORUM, into 3 parts. I want to start by talking about the numbering thing. So yeah, this is incredibly confusing. The way that they first said that they were, the thing that they started saying they were going to do with this fresh start was no more legacy numbering. The legacy numbering is going away. We're going back to number 1s. All the books are relaunching with a shiny new number 1 to attract those mythical new readers that comic book companies are always trying to snare so much. And there was a large part of me that was like, oh, great. On one hand, okay, we're starting back at number 1. That'll make it easier for people to get into comics. But on the other hand, you literally, like fucking 4 or 5 months ago, just decided for the first time in years to go back to legacy numbering. The numbers of the collective number of a comic book, like Spider-Man 800 and stuff like that. And then, of course, Tom Brevoort came out, and I'm going to read a quote directly from him, because just to avoid some confusion here. He said in another article, in an interview or something, he said, "Over the next couple of weeks, we'll be rolling out new beginnings for a few of our key franchises. New creative teams, new starting points, new storylines, all the big stuff that we've been building towards since Marvel Legacy began." So this isn't a relaunch. It's just a continuation of Marvel Legacy that they are overhyping and overbranding as a relaunch or a reboot. That's so confusing. Do you not understand how inherently confusing comic books already are? So you're gonna make the meta-narrative of comic books even more confusing? Stop it. Just keep releasing your books. Just stick to something. Anyway, Tommy Boy then went on to say that, yes, there are some books that the legacy numbering is going away with, but even those it's not completely going away with, which this I'm kind of happy about. Basically, they are putting 2 numbers on the books from now on, if they have a legacy number. So, for example, if when Amazing Spider-Man issue 801 comes out, it will say 801 somewhere on the book, but also it'll say number 1, probably bigger on the book somewhere. So this is something that I've been asking for a while. Basically just have the legacy number there to appease new readers, long-time readers, and then the basic, like, story arc number 1 that refreshes every couple story arcs or every time there's a jumping on point to appease the new readers who don't want to read 800 issues of Amazing Spider-Man to get caught up. The only problem here is that heavily depends on Marvel being smart about when they refresh the new reader-friendly number. So if they just put number 1 on it every 6 issues, that might get a bit confusing, because what if it's a story arc that's continuing from the past one and you need the context of the last one? Anyway, I would just recommend, like, find a good jumping on point, get with your writers and your editors and be like, hey, this isn't good jumping on point, we're kind of done with the previous story arcs, we've wrapped up and we're starting on a new thing, here's a good jumping on point, now we're going to refresh and put that new number 1 on it. They also could just be incredibly stupid and take the route of never refreshing the new reader-friendly number until a new creative team is formed, which would be really stupid. So, like, for example, I'll use a DC example right now. I'm just gonna go to Tom King's Batman, because, of course, Tom King has been writing Batman for about 42 issues right now, so that's a pretty intimidating number in and of itself, 42. That's a lot of comics to read, that's a lot of books to buy, but issue 41 just started a new story arc that you don't really need a lot of context for the previous ones. So issue 41 would have it would have the 41 somewhere in the corner and then a number 1 like elsewhere, and then that would refresh after the current arc, I think is the Poison Ivy arc. After the Poison Ivy arc wraps up and Poison Ivy is no longer in the book, not like that arc of Poison Ivy wraps up and then we start another arc with Poison Ivy that's continuing on the, you know what I mean, just jumping on points, so that you can read this comic and not be entirely confused and feel like you're jumping in the middle of some kind of story. Just be smart with the numbering, that's all I ask. But yeah, the bigger problem with this renumbering thing is it's just the confusion it creates. Like, I'm confused myself just talking about this. People are going to see this, like, going back to legacy numbering, but also kind of not doing legacy numbering anymore. And they're going to be like, is it a relaunch? Is it a reboot? Is anything happening at all, really? And it creates more confusion that's completely unnecessary and very avoidable. So, I don't know. It's basically, they go back to number 1 every time they shuffle creative teams up, obviously with some exceptions, but it's just dumb. So let's move on to the actual books, the content of Marvel's New Start, or Fresh Start. It's not new, it's fresh. Stay fresh, kids. Okay, so, overall here, there's not a huge problem, but there are some things that spell concern. The main thing being we don't know how many books are being released with Marvel's Fresh Start. I feel like we can assume that some are continuing, like Spider-Gwen is probably going to continue. That's a smaller book that kind of somehow has avoided cancellation for a while. I know Spider-Gwen sells a lot, but it's just, that's not the type of book you would think just keeps going and going, which I'm not complaining, I love Spider-Gwen, but most of the books that have been announced so far are solid core characters to the Marvel Universe that sell. We've got Thor, Hulk, Iron Man, stuff like that, Avengers. Those books will sell. Those books are core. Those books need to happen. If they didn't happen, it would feel weird. But there are some that spell concern, namely the Quicksilver miniseries, the Multiple Man miniseries, the Venom book, kind of. It's just... And I know some of these characters have live-action adaptations that are in the works or have already happened. There's a problem when you are releasing so many books, an oversaturation of books, every week, 1 billion books a week. You might want to sit down and figure out what to cut and what's necessary. And what's necessary are the characters in the movies, or the characters that sell really well. Spider-Gwen is a great point. She probably sells really well, and that's why her book is continuing. She's not on a movie anywhere, well, except the animated one that's coming out. She's not in the MCU anywhere, so it's not like a necessity that she gets a book or a tie-in. But she's still selling. So, what I'm trying to say here is Marvel needs to cut their line in half. And I know, oh no, don't, my books. I want all the books. I want every book. No, look. DC is releasing about half the books that Marvel is on a monthly basis. And they're doing great with fan reception. I think Marvel is still slightly outselling DC. But that's probably only because Marvel charges up the ass for books and DC does not. And DC is just releasing less, but also Marvel's fan rate, like people critically, Marvel is doing terribly. But DC's doing great. And there's probably a reason for that. It's probably because DC doesn't release as much, so their editors and their creatives are not so overstressed and overworked to get all these books out, and they are able to keep a cohesive world without sacrificing quality in any way. I am almost certain that everyone at Marvel is spread thin and has been for years, because the amount of comics that they release every month, the amount of comics that they release every week, just the amount of comics they release in general is just way too much. There's way too much going on. Why do we need a multiple man miniseries just to tie into a movie that may or may not happen? We don't need that. That's not a core book. That's not something that you need to be putting names on. Something that you need to be putting names on and focusing on is Thor, Hulk, Avengers, Iron Man, Captain America, books like this. And I know they are coming out, but they're being bogged down by the laundry list of comics that just come out that no one reads, no one picks up, no one uses. It's a waste of resources to make things that no one really cares about. And I want to make a bit of a disclaimer here. I am not the type of guy who's like, oh, we only need the big names. Those small characters, they don't deserve the big books. My favorite superhero is Spider-Woman. I love seeing smaller time characters get their own books or their own roles, and normally they're great. They get canceled because they're small time characters, but they're great. And they could turn into a cult hit or just a great time all around. But the problem is, when your main issue has been oversaturation for years, it might be time to focus down and say, okay, let's cut half our line, focus on the stuff that makes us money and that people actually care about, and over time we can reintroduce the stuff that longer time fans or more niche fans will enjoy. So the last thing I kind of want to talk about here is the way that they announced Marvel's fresh start. It's clunky and desperate is what it comes across as. The way that they did it, and especially the timing of when they did it, just spells concern, and I know that's a phrase I'm saying a lot, but this video is mostly speculation, so there's not much to go off of. Anyway, bear with me. Basically, they released a short video with CB Cebulski talking, and I think some other creatives, I think Joe Quesada was there or something. They were just like, yeah, there hasn't been this amount of creative shift up since Marvel Now in 2012, and we're doing all this crazy stuff. And just in the back of my head the whole time, I'm like, Marvel Legacy happened in October. It happened like 4 or 5 months ago. What are you doing? You don't come out here and be like, oh, we've never done this before. We've never renumbered our books before. We never shifted up some creative teams before. This has never been done before. And I know they're not really explicitly saying that, but it kind of feels like that the way that they drop this news. And they do it all the time. They drop stuff like this all the time. With Marvel Legacy, they really did say, no one has done this, but like this is the biggest thing to happen to the comic book industry. And all it was returning to legacy numberings, shifting maybe like 2 creative teams around, and then give us a bunch of variant covers that no one cared about. It's just a sad, desperate attempt to stay relevant and get a nice fan appreciation by going back to the form, putting Thor Odinson back in the worthy position, giving Captain America his classic costume, even though he's had that for a bit. You know, just fan service because they're like, look, we've been trying so much stuff, just like us again. And I feel like Marvel just doesn't know what their problem is. I genuinely believe that Marvel's problem is the oversaturation of books that they put out. If they focus down, I think most things would just come to pass and they'd be fine. There are other problems, of course, like Bendis being at the helm and him leading a very confusing, continuity-driven era for Marvel for a while, and just not being a great writer these days. But, and of course, some people will say that diversity is Marvel's problem. All of these are factors that go into why Marvel isn't so well received these days, in the comics anyway. And I do think that the oversaturation of books is the main issue here, but of course you could make whatever argument. It's irrelevant. The point is, Marvel needs a reboot. And yes, that kind of comes out of nowhere, but hear me out. This whole video, I've been exhausted talking about this subject. Why? Because I've already talked about this subject 4 months ago with Marvel Legacy. Also, side note, if Marvel Legacy didn't happen 4 months ago, I'm gonna sound like an idiot. It happened a few months ago. It happened then. Take a page out of Marvel's book. It happened then. They've been trying so much shit for so long that and nothing's working, clearly. And they don't want to cut down on their books, so try the last thing you haven't tried. Reboot your continuity. Reboot your in-canon continuity. Don't relaunch your line like you have 7 times over the past 6 years. Reboot your continuity. Just do it. Maybe they're already paving the way for this. I don't know. They've announced again. They always announce this when they relaunch stuff, and they announce this all the time, and they try to stick to it, but it sounds like they might be sticking to it this time, where they're like, no more event books. No more summer crossover blockbusters for at least 18 months, is I think what they said. Even though one is about to happen with Infinity Countdown or whatever. But anyway, this is beside the point. Maybe they're gearing up for one massive one, another Secret Wars-like thing, which again, just why didn't they reboot after Secret Wars? Perfect opportunity. Anyway, they could be gearing up to something with a dry spell of no events to make fans clamor and thirst for a Marvel crossover event again, and then they pull a Flashpoint, and they drop some kind of event where the world dies, everything dies, or just something happens and things are rebooted, New 52 style. We keep some of the continuity, compress it down or whatever. You don't even have to compress it down, just keep some of the continuity and say like, this happened then, blah, 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 blah. And then start with your base characters. Start from square one and work your way up to introducing the newer people. You could take people in from kind of what they did with Secret Wars, where they took Miles in and put him in 616. Take people in, take maybe Spider-Gwen, use some of her ideas. I don't know. There are things you could do. Every single time Marvel tries something to stay relevant or tries something to get their critical acclaim back in the comics, it just points me towards a reboot. It's like they're beating me down and like, you want a reboot, do you? We're not going to give it to you. I never wanted a Marvel reboot. I thought that was a terrible idea. I love the idea of continuity being always there and the Marvel characters just having this long legacy of stories that they follow up on. But over the past couple years, my mind has done a complete 180, and that's all I want now. That's all I want is a Marvel reboot, because that'd be great. And who knows? Maybe Marvel's fresh start is gonna be the best things since DC Rebirth. But I don't know. And I doubt it will be. Again, Marvel puts out some quality books, but it's overshadowed by all of the lackluster, boring, just mediocre shit that comes along with it. That's what I have to say about Marvel's fresh start. I want them to reboot. They're not going to reboot, but I hope this huge creative shift that they are claiming to be happening will breathe new life into Marvel. And again, a lot of the things that I said, they could be cutting down on their line, the amount of books that they're releasing, but it's just the presence of stuff like Multiple Man, Quicksilver, and Cosmic Ghost Rider that tells me that they're not. Like, why would they announce those 3 books ahead of who's going to be writing Spider-Man, or giving us a cover for Dan Slott's Iron Man, or something like that? It's just, it spells concern. I've said that so many times in this video, but it's true. I'm just concerned. The benefit of the doubt does not exist with Marvel anymore, to me. They haven't earned that. They haven't earned that in a while. They haven't earned that since Secret Wars. After Secret Wars, when they didn't reboot, I was like, oh, okay, well fuck you then. What are you doing? Why didn't they reboot after Secret? That's the real reason I'm making this. I'm just mad that they didn't reboot after Secret Wars. It's, how do you not, how do you twist that? How many hoops did they make Jonathan Hickman jump through to not reboot after Secret Wars? They were like, oh, well, everything's dead. I guess Doom could just hit the reset button on the whole universe and he knows what happened, but no one else does. That'd be cool. But we only got half of that. Doom knew what happened, and a select few characters knew what happened, but everything else was the same. It wasn't reset. All they did was jump back in time 8 months. Fuck you, Marvel. Anyway, let me know what you think. I know probably a lot of you are going to be like, no, Marvel shouldn't reboot. That's a terrible idea. But I genuinely want to hear your arguments for why a Marvel reboot would not be a good idea at this point. In the style of the New 52, by the way. Not completely starting from fresh, not telling Iron Man's origin from square one, but starting an Iron Man book after he's been active for a while. Just being clean, condensing continuity. I guess we need a new name. Who knows? But yeah, I can't think of a valid argument that would convince me, again, that a Marvel reboot would be bad. So if you could do that, please do that, because I would love to just be hopeful and happy again about Marvel. And I'm hating myself as I'm saying this, because, like I said at the top of the video, I don't like people who say, I wish I could be happy, but I'm not. Or that's probably, hold on, that's bad wording. I wish I could like something, but I'm not. Some people just can't be happy. It's fine. Depression exists. I have it. We all have it. Anyway, I don't know why this turned into a therapy session. It's real hot in here. There's a gas leak somewhere, I'm sure. Anyway, thanks for watching. Bye.